as time went on, we realized that injecting more of us, more of our personalities and our quirks, that people wanted to get to know us. That was something we didn't expect, but we
No.
have really pivoted to embrace more and more. And the private podcast is definitely a way to do that.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. I am repeating myself from the last recording. Nora is not with us today. She is sick, but I will be running this solo. And today we have our first two-person guest, I think. So me and Nora are usually the double that run a company together, but Sara and Brittany are here and they have such a fun business. They're also college professors, which I love. And so I think we're going to have a very fun conversation about how they're using Hello Audio as a lead magnet in their company. So girls, welcome.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Yay. So why don't you give a brief intro into your guys' background and your business?
Sure. My name is Brittany. This is Sara, and we are together form the Carterhaugh School of Folklore and the Fantastic, where we teach creative souls how to re-enchant their lives using folklore. We have our PhDs in folklore from the Ohio State University, where we also did a lot with English literature. So folklore and the fantastic is really our bread and butter. It's the stuff that we love. We love fairy tales and supernatural folklore and the gothic and all kinds of things like that. And we know that there are a lot of people out there who love that stuff too, but never got the chance to study it seriously in college because they were focused on more practical things.
They were majoring in accounting, like, rational people.
Exactly. When we finished our PhDs, the job market was terrible. And we sort of idly mused about how we could think of making our own school in some way. And we started looking online and realizing that there were people doing that kind of thing, but not really for folklore. And we were like, well, this could be a really amazing thing to do. And it has exploded from there. It has been amazing. We have made this amazing community that is full of people who are so excited to learn, so excited about folklore, just like we are. And that has been an amazing journey.
Yeah. Our whole deal is basically we really wanted to take folklore studies out of the ivory tower, make it really accessible to
And fun.
yeah, and fun to all of the people who never got a chance to experience that in college, never got to go to college, maybe. Yeah, and it's been kind of a dream. It started out as a complete joke, honestly. We were joking about it.
Make our own school.
Yeah, like when we were really, really flagged at an academic conference. And then we were like, you know what? Honestly, we have as good of a chance of making this work as we do succeeding on the academic job market. So let's give this a whirl. And I'm so glad that we did.
I'm so glad that we did too. It has been surprising and wonderful in pretty much every possible way.
Cool. And you guys are still teaching. Are you teaching part-time or yeah,
No,
what's
all of
your
our work Carterhaugh full time. This is
Yeah.
our full time job. We teach courses. That's kind of like the main thing we do through our own organization. So we teach all kinds of things from like intro to fairy tales to all kinds of courses on the Gothic. We just did one on dark academia earlier this year.
Oh,
We did
fun.
one on Tolkien earlier this year. So much fun. But we also do things with other organizations. We are regular lecturers for the Smithsonian. We're in the process of creating our second streaming series for formerly Wondrium, now the Great Courses. And we're also writing
nice.
our first book, which is crazy. So,
Oh, I bet.
yeah, we have a kind of a perpetually full plate, which is something that I'm sure we'll return to when we talk about Hello Audio and why it's been so helpful to us as chronically overbooked, crazy entrepreneur people.
We just volunteer everything and
Right.
we have a hard time saying no
We're
to exciting opportunity. It kind of trains you that way, right?
100%. Cool. Well, this is going to be a fun conversation. I'm excited. So let's talk about how you found out about private podcasts. I think were in exchange that you've kind of been following me for a little while. So was it me that you're like, wait, what is this? Or did you see it somewhere else?
So I think actually the first time that we encountered private podcasts specifically was through the person who ultimately became our business coach.
Oh, cool.
She had a private podcast, and listening to it and engaging with it was one of the major factors that made us decide to go with her and made us think, oh no, this is definitely like the right person to help us. It felt like kind of like an insider way of getting to know her a little bit. It really showcased her personality and like what she was offering both as a person and as a coach. And that felt like a really good way to kind of dip our toes in the water before giving her, an outrageous amount of money.
Yep. Yep.
So, yeah, I think that was the catalyst for when we were like, "Oh my god, no, this is, like, really powerful."
Yeah, and then we got into looking at Hello Otter, and we were like, "Oh, it's Brittany! I love her."
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's so
exactly.
funny.
It was so wonderful to listen to those early podcast episodes with our business coach. It really felt like we were getting to know her and be
Mm,
friends with her in a way. And one of
Even
the
though we hadn't, like, talked to her at all.
yeah,
right?
exactly. But
Online
one
is
of
so
the
weird
things
like that.
It's so weird.
one of the things that has been surprising about making our online school with these kinds of courses was that we started out feeling more like we were just taking college courses and putting them online.
Mm, mhm.
And as time went on, we realized that injecting more of us, more of our personalities and our quirks, that people wanted to get to know us.
Mm.
And that was something we didn't expect, but we
No.
have really pivoted to embrace more and more. And the private podcast is definitely a way to do that.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's the medium of delivery? Because I know you guys have a bunch of social accounts, you're out there doing your thing. What about audio really shows, like, somebody's personality? Like, what do you think is happening there?
I wish I had, like, a tidy way to answer that. I was like, "But it does." Like, it just does,
Mm,
you know? Like, you get a chance to hear a lot of, I think, more casual conversations sometimes.
mm,
It often feels unscripted. With us, it pretty much is unscripted all the time
Right.
anyway, but I think it especially lends itself well to that. There's something about just hearing someone's voice in your ear that is, I think, really fundamentally different than looking at a picture of them or even a video of them.
mhm,
Like, it feels more immediate. I feel like it feels like you are hanging out with them,
Yes,
yep,
that's
you
what I
know?
was gonna say. I think that one of the things that is appealing about Sarah and I teaching together is that we have a really good flow. We're best friends in real life, and people really pick up on that. And I think that having the audio really helps
It
keep
shows it.
it shows it. Yeah, it's like it's
mm,
just recording a fun gathering we're having in Sarah's living room or something like that, as opposed to
mm,
like the email or a video where we're doing a lecture or something like that.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it's one thing to tell people, in a blurb on our website, like, "We're best friends and
Right.
academics who started a business," and, like, I mean, we think that's compelling,
it's pretty
but,
cool.
like, it's still really different than actually hearing us talk to
Mm,
each other,
Yeah.
hearing the flow, hearing the fact that, like, "Oh, no, these are people who actually do know each other, who actually are best friends."
You spend an inordinate amount of time together, who know each other inside and out, and who really love this stuff and geek out over it
mm,
completely. The podcast, you can get that sense without any editing, without any pre-planned
Yeah.
feeling of, you just get to be invited in.
Yeah, and because of the
yeah,
2 of
it's like
them out together, it's like, "Come hang out with us,
Yeah.
friends," you know?
yeah, I was gonna say it's like being in the living room with you guys because
Yeah.
I think I'm with you on this too. I think video is great and it's really cool to like see, what you look like and what your environment looks like. And I'm taking in all that information that's helpful. But there is something really magical about just hearing voices and filling, I mean, we know this as readers, right? Filling in the imagery in your own head as well. That I think that's what makes it more intimate. Like I've talked to folks who've like lost a family member or something like that and they save those voicemails and yeah the pictures are there and the videos are there too but there is something really special about the voice that like gets in your head literally and so that piece serves its own purpose. It's not that like video shouldn't exist or that like right that doesn't make sense but it's more like it's very intimate and makes that connection. You said immediate, Sarah, I think, and I was like, oh yeah, like it's instant, like I'm transported instantly and I'm not distracted thinking about potentially other things like, "Oh, her jewelry is really pretty," or whatever, right? Like I'm like more like focused on the words kind of thing.
Love
Yeah.
all that.
So let's talk about how you decided to, yeah, maybe some of the first feeds you created, and then we can talk about that impact it's had on your business and maybe specifically focus a little bit on your lead gen stuff as well.
Yeah. So lead gen has by far been the most effective thing that
Mm.
we've done with a private podcast. We actually heard someone else doing that, put out a private podcast as a lead magnet. And we were like, that seems like a really smart
Oh,
idea.
intriguing.
How intriguing. So we were preparing to launch a course or a group called the Carterhaugh Writer Society. We have a lot of writers who are into fantasy and the fantastic in all kinds of ways, using folklore in their writing.
We also have a lot of people writing their dissertations or writing.
Oh, I bet.
Writing to exactly.
You just have
That's cool.
like gamut of the people who do the writing.
Yes. And so like we attract people who do writing. We're writers ourselves and do all kinds of writing. And so we decided we were going to do this month-long sprint to like work on our book. And we were like, wonder if people would like to join us. So we created this whole thing with all of these really neat additional things, but mostly based around the idea of doing silent Zooms, like just together. And it was very successful, but we owe a lot of that success to the fact that we created a private podcast as a lead generation for that course. It worked really, really well as an ad. We called it Write Like a Witch. And
Mm.
it was
Good
a
name.
6-episode private podcast where we gave some of our very favorite tips about writing and put a little magical folklore spin on it, and people loved it. They were so excited about it. We had done something somewhat similar. We made a workbook that was called Spellcraft that was around the same ideas. And that was really, really useful for people. And we got a lot of really great feedback from it. I think our conversion rate was like 36%, which is fantastic.
Oh, that's awesome.
And we didn't really spend that much money on it because we didn't know how it was going to go. So I think maybe we spent $200
It
on
was
it.
$200. Brittany went and dug out the stats for this. So we had
Okay, cool.
5,149 click throughs and
1,843 conversions. So
Oh,
36%
cool.
rate on only $200 worth of ads, which was
Oh, wow. That's
And we're
crazy.
like,
Yeah.
yay, good bang for a buck right there.
yeah, I'd say.
Yeah.
And a lot of those people went on to participate in the Writer
Mm.
Society.
Mhm.
And even those who were already in our world and were already going to do the Writer Society, they loved the podcast. They loved the different episodes we came up with. We had things like tiny sparks and conjuring your words and using doppelgangers, like we had these really core ideas about writing that have been really helpful for us, couched in these sort of magical terms.
Which also gave them a really good chance to figure out like what we
What
are
we are
like and
about.
like what is like, it's all in a very aesthetically magical, fun frame, which we love. Like it's very important to us, but also it had so much substance. Like this was practical stuff that is largely like a lot of these strategies that we use to finish our dissertations,
Yep.
and if it's good enough to help us finish our dissertations, we feel like it is helpful to anyone who wants to at least start writing. So they could consume this podcast. They could be like, oh, like it's going to be beautiful and quirky and fun and not take itself too seriously, but also like, dear God, there is so much information packed into this. And it was
Actually
such,
useful information.
yes, so
Yeah.
useful. And that was just such a great way to showcase exactly the kind of thing that they were going to get in this writing program and also convince them like, oh, like this worked for them, could work for me, and they'll be there with me, talking to me
Mm.
while I'm doing all of this. So
Yeah.
it just worked really well.
It was a really good way to show off who we are
Yeah.
and what we're all about and really just shove that in people's faces right away in a way that, like a standard lead magnet, like a PDF, really can't do as well.
Yeah, that can show
Totally.
off our aesthetic. It can
Sure.
show off some of the substance, but it's just not going to be the whole like, this is what the experience will be like.
You're basically, yeah, you're creating the experience as on the front end to show what it would be like when they take the next step. And by
Yes,
making
exactly.
it similar, they feel safe, they trust you, they also know what they're in for. I think a lot in the online spaces sometimes are like, it's really flashy on the front end, and then they get in and they're like, right? So there's ways that you basically demo like what it's going to be like both ways. And I think that's definitely a big takeaway. You mentioned the ads. I didn't realize that it was off of ads. Did you also like email your list as well? Was the promotion
Oh, yeah.
only ads? Cool. So it was everybody, it was like a full blast. Is there anything you want to share about the ads and what you learned? I think that makes a lot of people are curious about running ads to a private podcast. Language you used, imagery you used, anything that made someone, because especially because private podcasts are such a kind of new thing. And I would imagine that your audience maybe isn't very familiar. Maybe in the online space we are, but like your audience probably is like, what the heck? So, any thoughts around that?
So, what we really leaned hard into when we were making the ad for the private podcast was the whole aesthetic thing that we were talking about earlier. We called the podcast Write Like a Witch. The imagery we used had a computer with somebody like listening to a podcast, but like with sparkles and stuff like that. So,
It looks kind of like what you're looking
what
at.
you're looking
Right.
at here.
Yeah. So,
Headphones, but like, somebody listening and obviously in a magical kind of environment.
mm,
And the ad itself used words that were associated with folklore in some way. We used like little sparkle emojis. So I think part of our strategy with the ad was really leaning hard into the aesthetic and being like, look, we know this isn't for everyone, but if it's for
mm,
you, it's really for you. And I think that is what sets ads apart from
mm.
other things you're scrolling through on your feed or something like that. It's something that has to speak to a very particular person. And we've really tried to do that with this.
Did you call it a private podcast?
We did, yes.
Okay.
We
Okay.
did. And we did get some questions about what
Mhm.
that meant and everything, but mostly people were very on board. Once we were like, oh, yeah, it's just, you can't find it if you search, but you'll get a special link to it. People were like, oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah. Honestly, there was less resistance and fewer questions than I was anticipating because you're right.
Mhm.
Probably most of our people probably have never heard of or signed up for a private podcast before, but they know what podcasts are,
Mm.
and they'd been begging us for years to have a podcast
Oh, I
anyway. So I
bet.
think our core audience already was just like, oh, thank God they finally
They
did.
finally did it.
That's funny. No,
The
very
other thing,
cool.
it worked so well. Like, we were
Mm.
just stunned by how effective this was as a lead magnet. And like, we've had very well performing lead magnets before, I think, because we really commit to our core, clients,
Yeah, our
kind of
target audience.
lean into the as aesthetic. But even so, this worked stunningly well. So like, I want your audience to know that. Like, try it. It works really, really well sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. I think the scary thing is people put their ideas in their head of like, "Oh, my audience doesn't know what a private podcast is." So I love that you guys are bringing this up, like, that they do that.
I would say
And I
that overall, our audience is not like super tech savvy either.
mm,
Like,
mhm.
but they were
Yeah.
really willing to go with it.
Yeah, we have some people our age and younger, but honestly, a lot of our audience is older
Mm.
and are people who are retired and have the money to spend on fun stuff.
Yeah.
So, we do get a lot of tech questions, but not necessarily about this at all. This was
Yeah.
very straightforward for people.
Could you highlight any, like, audience response or listeners that of what they said about that podcast specifically, or why they purchased maybe the next step tied to that podcast?
Overall, the response was just very, very, very positive. People who were new, who found it from the ad, um, you know, occasionally would shoot us a personal email or
Mm.
something, being like, I'm so happy I found you. This is amazing.
Yeah, this
Peop
is just what I was looking
Just what
for.
I was looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah. People who were already like in our world on our list wrote back saying similar stuff, just being like, oh, you finally did it. Like, you finally did the podcast. Other people wrote back and said, oh my God, like, this works. I wrote, 300 words today and I haven't written anything for 4 years, stuff like that. So it clearly worked.
Yeah,
You
it
know.
resonated with people. And I think it gave them a really good test of what the full experience would be like. And, we did not get any complaints about the whole experience because I think
Mhm.
people knew what they were signing up for because of the private podcast.
So if they
Mm.
signed up, they knew what they were signing up for and they were really happy to be there, which also just made it so much nicer.
And so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the business end of the experience, just being like, yay, the right people are here. Like, we called in the
Mm.
right people through the podcast, and that just makes our lives easier than people coming in who it is not a good fit for.
Right. And I will
Yeah.
say that, we can get people who it isn't really the best fit for people who are looking for something a little bit different than what we offer. For example, we talk a lot about magic and spells and witchcraft and stuff like that in terms of folklore.
Metaphor and
Yeah.
folklore. Yeah.
Metaphor and folklore, but we're not, pagan. We're not offering
Mhm.
like classes on how to craft spells or anything like
And
that.
sometimes people get confused. Fair.
Ah.
Like, I get it.
Which is
Mhm.
totally fair. Yeah, exactly. But this was a way to be like, no, actually, this is what we're doing. This is what we're about. We're all about the idea that folklore is magic and art and that community kind of feeling. And that is what's important about it. And I think that people really got that by listening to us.
Yeah, like one of the things that we say all the time is that for us, magic is art plus community.
Mhm.
And if you
Mm.
listen
Connection.
and connection, yeah. So if you listen to the podcast, you will hear that. And if that resonates, you'd be like, great, sign me up. And if that is not the definition you're looking for, then you'll know that you should find someone
Is an expert
who
in
goes
that.
with that. Yeah, who is an expert in that. Yes.
Very cool. What are you doing with the podcast now? Is it on Evergreen or do you release it, seasonally for launches? What's your use of that lead magnet? Is it still going?
So we haven't shut the podcast down. Like people who have the link already can still
Mm.
listen to it, but we're not promoting it at the moment. However, we did use it when we did our second round of that writing program, and it worked really, really,
Really
well.
well again.
I would say
Yeah.
about as well.
Oh, yeah.
Time. So it's
Oh, that's
this,
cool.
this incredible, advertising resource that we now have that we already made. And all we have to do now is just run the ad to it when we want to grow our audience or prime our audience before releasing this program, which we are hoping to do over and over again because we have a lot of writing that we have to
A
do.
lot of writing. Yeah.
And we need peer pressure to help us.
Right.
Help us
They're
there.
helping us as much as we're helping them, really.
Yeah.
Totally.
Especially with this.
That's how you build a good business, right? When you can get a lot out of it. With the ads, back to the ads a little bit. Did you do anything different with the copy or the images or anything like that, or just keep running the same thing that second time that you did it?
The second time was the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, it had worked so well the first time that we decided to run the same basically the same ad, with dates and
Perfect.
stuff changed. But yeah, it was why mess with a good thing?
I mean, let me tell you, yeah. What in the podcast, a question a lot of people get when it comes to lead gen for a program. Was it obvious that you were selling? Did you add an episode that kind of talked about the program? Did you run ads on it? Did you lead up front and say like, hey, at the end of this, we are going to talk about our program? What did you guys decide to or how did you guys decide to structure it?
So I think the way that we wanted to do it was to give them a lot of value up front without aggressively selling at them and talk about it just like a little bit more and a little bit more as the episodes went on. I think there was a throwaway like line about it in the first episode.
Yeah, in each episode
Mm.
we would say something like, "Oh, we're going to talk about this more in the Carterhaugh Writer Society." But then as the episodes went on, we talked a little bit more about it, and then at the end, in the last one we're like, "If you enjoyed this,
You will enjoy this.
right, exactly."
And it still wasn't a lot, it was maybe like a paragraph worth
Mhm.
of words at the end of that last episode. It was very important to us that this whole podcast not be just a pitch.
Yeah.
We wanted it
Mm.
to be something that was inherently valuable on its own. And I think we really stuck to that. And I think that is part of why it worked. People didn't feel like they were being aggressively upsold to the entire time. They felt like they were getting something really good. And then it felt, okay, if I want more of this, here's where I go to get more of it.
Right. We weren't shy about where it was to get more of
Mm.
this, but we were very much like, this is also valuable just on its own.
Mm. Very good. So you haven't done like client testimonials or people that have bought it. You haven't put those inside the podcast?
We
Haven't yet, no.
Mm.
not
Mm,
yet,
maybe-
but we
maybe a
may,
future one.
work it a little bit because, yeah, we've had a lot of really great success with this program. So,
Yeah, honestly, I feel like this has been our most successful program that we've done just in terms of results for students, sheer unbridled enthusiasm. So
Yeah.
goodness knows we have the testimonials for it.
yeah,
there
if
you
you're
go.
into this kind of thing, this is the best place to go. I firmly believe that.
Yeah.
Love it. What kind of advice do you have for somebody who's like thinking about starting their first private podcast, sitting on the fence, not really doing it yet? Is there anything you would say to them as you guys took that chance yourself?
Oh my God, rip off the Band-Aid. Just do it.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this before we came on the show. It was very much a start before you're ready kind of thing, because
Mm.
if we had waited until everything was perfect, we never would have done it. And so we just were like, you know what, we're doing it.
And you ran ads to it. I think that's
Right, and
pretty
we're running
epic.
ads to it. We
Yeah.
gotta do it. And it was so much easier than we thought it was gonna be. It was
Largely because of Hello Audio, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, it just made our life so
It made it
much
so
easier.
much easier. We just logged on, we recorded a video of ourselves being ourselves and talking about this. And, we had some notes, but mostly we were just riffing on topics we knew really well. And so it wasn't a lot of prep. It was very easy to get the podcast out there through Hello Audio. And yeah, if you're hesitating doing it, just jump right in with both feet, because it is so much simpler than you think it's going to be.
Yeah, it's so much easier now than it has been in the past.
Mhm.
That's part of why it took us forever to actually make a podcast. We didn't want to do the 50,000 steps and remix everything and just like, no, we don't have time for that. We just don't have time for that. And this Hello Audio streamlined the process so much, made it so much easier. So if you're on the fence, just do it. You'll be so happy you did.
I could totally see in your space, like your topic, that I'm sure there's a lot of podcasts that are float around this, right? But they might be like kind of overproduced in a good way. That's great, especially if you're doing storytelling and all of that and highly edited. So I could see the hesitation to be like, yeah, we could do a public podcast, but what about engaging the folks that are right here
Yeah.
versus putting this out into the ether and like not being able to connect with those people as easily as some of the folks who are right here, right around us right now. And I think that's a choice a lot of our users make. And we've made ourselves, like we took a while to launch this public podcast ourselves. But yeah, because I think a public podcast has a certain level of commitment that's a little bit different than what we're doing with private for sure.
Yes, that's such a good point. And actually, that leads right into another way that we have used private podcasting, which is as a bonus for this writing
Mm.
program we've been talking about. So, one of the things that we included in addition to writing wildly together over Zoom was we told them that we would create a private podcast that was all about like the behind the scenes of writing our book in real time.
Oh, I love this.
Yeah, and they were all like, "We want that.
We want that.
We
Yeah.
wanna know what on earth this looks like in, like, a very real, immediate this is where we are right now. Like, we haven't figured everything out yet, like, we are in it, in the middle of figuring out how to do this," and people really wanted that, and we really wanted to share it with them, but also we really didn't necessarily wanna post that for the entire internet to hear.
Right. This
Mhm,
wasn't
mhm.
something that we wanted to make a public podcast about, but
No.
we would want to share it with people who we in a more intimate way,
Mhm.
who people we were familiar with, who had opted into one of our courses, who understood who we were. And that was really successful. People were really happy with it. They loved seeing the behind the scenes, like gossip. They loved seeing the nitty gritty of like the process of getting a book done.
Yeah, and we
Mhm.
have stats on that too. More than half of the students enrolled in the course listened to it immediately, like
Mhm.
within the first
Oh, yeah.
First couple
day.
of days, people were like waiting for it.
So,
Yeah.
it was really fun to have an avenue to really share that in depth and also not feel like we've had it on blast to the entire internet.
Yeah, I think a private podcast behind the scenes of a book launch, book creation is such a great way to also engage the people that may potentially buy it. I don't know, depending on the
Right.
type of book that you
Yeah.
wrote, but the people that are going to buy your book are going to be like, oh my gosh, I know how this book was made. I know where they made decisions, right? Like that's really cool.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank
We
you.
need to get all the famous authors on here doing something like that. I think people would love
Oh,
that.
people would love
People
it.
would love it.
I
Oh my
would
gosh.
Mhm.
listen to my favorites,
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
I would kill for that, honestly.
Super fun. Awesome. Yeah, I think that kind of wraps it up. I've had such a great time talking to you guys. Is there anything you want to add about private podcast creation? Anything we missed?
This is kind of silly, but it's funny about that last private podcast we told you about, the behind the scenes one.
Mhm.
So this is what we mean in terms of like starting before anything is perfect at all, because we promised this behind the scenes podcast And then our book contract kept not arriving and not
Oh,
arriving and not
no.
arriving way past the window when we had
And we
been
really weren't supposed to talk about it before that.
Oh.
release it. We couldn't release it because we didn't want to talk about it, even as publicly as this would be, until everything was actually signed. So we had to keep telling our students, like, oh my God, we'll give it to you, like, as soon as we
We
possibly
promise.
can.
Yeah.
But like, we legally can't.
Oh my gosh. That's
And
so the
it was
buildup. It created more buildup though.
But, like, it was fine. Everyone was so nice about it too.
Yeah.
Like, they understood. Like, they're lovely people. They were like, "We know that you will give it to us as soon as you can." And we were like, "We promise we will." And we did, like, very shortly after we actually got the contract. Yeah, not perfect, but still, went so, so well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Decided to do it before everything
There
is
you
ready.
go. Are you guys still adding to that podcast, or like the book is almost ready and out kind of
I
thing?
wish the book was almost ready.
We're still in the middle of that, so we might add some more to the one we've got
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, but that exists as its own, I think, 5-episode
Mhm.
series. I think it is useful in its current sort of state, and I think that a follow-up would probably be a great idea once we have the full rough draft into our editor. That might be a fun time to add an additional one.
Mm,
To
totally.
the unfolding series.
The unfolding series behind the scenes of writing for the series.
Super fun. Cool. Well, this has been such a fun convo. So we end every episode of Hello Audio's Launch Your Private Podcast with a question. If there was a private podcast series about your life's ramblings, what would you guys call it? Would it be separate? Would it be together? That's for you
Well,
guys to decide.
We could do it together, definitely. We do everything together.
I've gathered.
And also, we get so much more done that way.
Mm.
We would definitely call it Sparkle and Cackle.
Yep.
Oh,
Sparkle
good.
and Dr.
That's
We've
a good
definitely thought
one.
about this before. So when we got we're like, oh,
I'm prepared. It may come out.
maybe someday.
Stay tuned. Well, super fun. I will definitely tune into that one, you guys. Thank you so much, Sara and Brittany. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you today.
It's been so great. Thank you, Lindsay.
All right. Best of luck and keep us posted with how your podcast goes. Let me know if you guys, I don't know, start to spend more money on ads and really blow this
Yeah.
thing up. Let's
We really
make it happen.
Yeah, I know.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And there you have it, audio heads. Another episode of Launch Your Private Podcast is in the books. I hope you're leaving today feeling even more ready to amplify your voice and connect with your audience in meaningful ways. The adventure continues in our next episode with even more insights, strategies, and inspiration to help you along your own private podcasting journey. Of course, make sure to check out helloaudio.fm to start your own private podcast. And remember, you've got amazing content that needs to be heard. So let's turn the volume up. Until next time.